Imagine getting a $500 fine for casting a fishing line in a quiet lake behind your own home, a lake you've loved for years, where your kids learned to fish, where you've spent countless evenings unwinding. Now picture the HOA, a group of clipboard-wielding neighbors, telling you it's against the rules to enjoy that water. Most people would grumble, pay the fine, and move on. But not James Carter. When his HOA slapped him with that fine, he didn't just fight back. He bought the entire lake and banned the whole neighborhood from ever stepping foot near it again. James Carter had always been a practical man, the kind who fixed his own car, grew his own vegetables, and never backed down from a challenge. He'd lived in the quiet, manicured neighborhood of Willow Creek for nearly a decade, a place where every lawn was trimmed to perfection and every mailbox matched. It was a nice enough community, or so he thought, until the HOA started tightening its grip. At first, it was small things, a warning about his kids' bikes left in the driveway, a note about his trash cans being visible from the street. Annoying, sure, but manageable. Then came the fishing fine, and that's when James realized he wasn't dealing with reasonable people anymore. The lake behind Willow Creek wasn't huge, but it was beautiful, a shimmering stretch of water surrounded by tall pines, home to bass, catfish, and the occasional heron gliding overhead. It was technically private property, owned by a local real estate company, but for years, residents had used it freely. Kids fished off the small dock, families picnicked by the shore, and retirees like James's neighbor, Mr. Thompson, spent mornings casting lines and swapping stories. Nobody ever questioned it. The HOA, though, had other ideas. It started with a letter taped to James's front door one crisp October morning. Violation notice, it read in bold red letters. The fine print accused him of unauthorized recreational activity for fishing in the lake. The letter demanded $500 and warned that further violations could result in liens on his property. James thought it was a mistake. He'd been fishing there for years, same as everyone else. He called the HOA president, Linda Hensley, expecting a quick resolution. "Mr. Carter," Linda said, her voice as crisp as the letter, "the lake is not community property. It's private land, and we've received complaints about unauthorized use. The HOA has a responsibility to enforce rules." "Complaints?" James asked, leaning against his kitchen counter, the phone pressed to his ear. "From who? I've never seen anyone complain about fishing. Kids play there every weekend." "That's confidential," Linda replied. "The point is, the rules are clear. No fishing, no loitering, no unauthorized activities. Pay the fine, and this goes away." James hung up, his jaw tight. He wasn't about to pay $500 for something he'd done openly for years. He went door to door that evening, asking neighbors if they'd gotten similar fines. Most hadn't, but a few had received warnings about lake usage. Mr. Thompson, a wiry man in his 70s who'd lived in Willow Creek longer than anyone, shook his head when James showed him the letter. "They're getting bold," Mr. Thompson said, sipping coffee on his porch. "Last year, it was my bird feeder. Said it attracted undesirable wildlife. Now they're after the lake. That's low, even for them." James dug deeper. He spent hours at the county clerk's office, pulling records on the lake's ownership. It was indeed owned by Willow Properties, a small real estate firm that had bought it years ago as part of a larger land deal. The HOA, it seemed, had no legal claim to the lake but had decided to police it anyway, citing community standards. James found an old agreement allowing residents reasonable access to the lake, but the HOA's lawyer argued it was outdated and non-binding. The more James learned, the angrier he got. The HOA's board, Linda, a retired accountant, Greg, a car dealership owner, and Susan, a part-time yoga instructor, had been flexing their power for years, fining people for everything from unapproved paint colors to holiday lights left up past January. The lake was just their latest target. James suspected the complaints came from Greg, who lived closest to the lake and had once griped about kids making noise near his property. But he couldn't prove it. James decided to fight the fine at the next HOA meeting. He prepared a speech, printed copies of the lake access agreement, and even got Mr. Thompson and a few others to back him up. The meeting was held in the community clubhouse, a sterile room with fluorescent lights and folding chairs. About 30 residents showed up, most just there to avoid trouble. Linda presided, gavel in hand, while Greg and Susan flanked her like bodyguards. "Next item," Linda said, adjusting her glasses. Mr. Carter's appeal regarding the lake violation. James stood, clearing his throat. I've lived here 9 years, and I've fished in that lake since day one. So have half the people in this room. There's no rule against it in the HOA bylaws, and I've got documents showing we're allowed access. This fine is nonsense, and I'm asking you to drop it. Greg leaned forward, his face red. The lake's private property, James. You can't just do whatever you want. We're protecting the community. Protecting it from what? James shot back. Families having fun? Old men like Thompson enjoying their retirement? Who's this hurting? Susan chimed in, her voice syrupy. It's about liability, James. If someone drowns, the HOA could be sued. We're looking out for everyone. The room murmured. A few nodded, but others looked skeptical. Mr. Thompson raised his hand. I've been fishing there for 20 years. Never heard of a drowning. This is about control, not safety. The debate went on for an hour, but Linda shut it down. The board's decision stands, she said. The fine is upheld. Next item. James left the meeting fuming. He paid the $500 to avoid a lien, but he wasn't done. He started researching the lake's owner, Willow Properties. It took weeks of calls and emails, but he finally got through to the company's owner, a man named Robert Ellis. Ellis was in his 60s, semi-retired, and owned several parcels around the county. He'd forgotten about the lake, he admitted, assuming it was just part of Willow Creek's amenities. How much would you sell it for? James asked during a phone call, pacing his living room. Ellis laughed. You serious? It's just a pond, really. Nobody's asked about it in years. I'm serious, James said. Name a price. Ellis threw out a number. $150,000. It was steep, more than James had expected, but he didn't flinch. He'd saved most of his life, working long hours as a contractor, and his house was nearly paid off. He could swing it if he tightened his belt. They negotiated, and after a few weeks, they settled on $135,000, including the lake and a small strip of land around it. James didn't tell anyone, not even his wife, Karen, until the deal was nearly done. Karen was practical like him, but she worried about the cost. You're buying a lake to spite the HOA? She asked one night, chopping vegetables for dinner. It's not spite, James said, though part of him knew it was. It's about what's right. They can't just take away something we've all used for years. If I own it, they can't touch it. Karen sighed but didn't argue. She knew when James got an idea, he saw it through. He hired a lawyer to handle the paperwork, making sure every detail was airtight. By early spring, the deal closed. James Carter, the man who'd been fined for fishing, was now the sole owner of Willow Creek Lake. He didn't announce it right away. Instead, he waited for the next HOA meeting, scheduled for April. In the meantime, he had a surveyor mark the lake's boundaries and a contractor install a low wooden fence around the perimeter, just enough to make a point. He also posted signs, private property, no trespassing. Neighbors noticed, of course. Rumors spread. Some thought the HOA had sold the lake. Others figured a developer was moving in. Greg even knocked on James's door one evening, demanding answers. What's with the fence? Greg asked, arms crossed. You know something about this? James just smiled. You'll find out soon enough. The April HOA meeting was packed. Word had gotten out about the fence and signs, and residents wanted answers. Linda opened the meeting, looking flustered. We're aware of the situation at the lake, she said. We're investigating the ownership change and will update you soon. James raised his hand. No need to investigate, he said, standing. He held up a copy of the deed, his voice steady. I bought the lake. It's mine now. And effective immediately, nobody from this neighborhood is allowed on my property. The room went silent. Linda's mouth opened, but no words came out. Greg's face turned purple. Susan blinked rapidly, clutching her notepad. Finally, Mr. Thompson let out a loud, "Well, damn," and started clapping. A few others joined in, mostly those who'd clashed with the HOA before. You can't do that. Greg sputtered. That lake's for the community. Funny, James said, because you told me it was private property when you fined me $500 for fishing. You were right, it is private. And now I decide who uses it. Linda banged her gavel. This is outrageous. We'll sue you, James. You can't block off a community resource. Go ahead, James said. My lawyer's ready. But you might want to check your own rules first. You don't own the lake. Never did. The meeting dissolved into chaos. Some residents cheered James on, others shouted about fairness and access. Linda adjourned early, storming out with Greg and Susan in tow. James went home, poured himself a beer, and sat on his back porch, staring at the lake. For the first time in months, he felt at peace. The fallout was immediate. The HOA sent a cease and desist letter, claiming James's actions violated community standards. His lawyer responded with a polite but firm letter pointing out the HOA's lack of jurisdiction. A few neighbors tried to negotiate, asking for limited access in exchange for good behavior. James wasn't interested. He'd made his point. If the HOA could fine him for using the lake, he could ban them for the same reason. Not everyone was against him. Mr. Thompson stopped by the next week, grinning ear to ear. "You're a legend, Carter," he said. "Wish I'd thought of it myself." A few others, like the Millers, whose kids loved fishing, apologized for not speaking up sooner. James let them use the lake occasionally, but only as his guests. He wasn't running a public park. The HOA tried one last tactic, a petition to restore community access. They went door to door, framing James as the villain. It backfired. Many residents were tired of the HOA's overreach and saw James's move as a rebellion against their petty tyranny. The petition fizzled out. By summer, the lake was quieter than ever. James fished whenever he wanted, sometimes with his kids, sometimes alone. He didn't gloat, but he didn't have to. The HOA's power had taken a hit, and Linda, Greg, and Susan were noticeably less smug at meetings. Greg even put his house up for sale, though James doubted it was just because of the lake. James never regretted his decision. The lake was more than water and fish. It was a stand against people who thought they could control everything. He'd paid a price, sure, but he'd won something bigger, the freedom to live on his terms. And every time he cast his line into that shimmering water, he knew it was worth it.